So the Cardinals have had a couple of injuries going into training camp. They lost Walter Nolen to a calf injury. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then they lost Starling Thomas for the year with a torn ACL. And immediately I'm thinking, damn, that sucks. This Cardinals team, who we applauded their depth. The defensive line has no TJ Watt or JJ Watt or Myles Garrett on it, but it does have solid defensive pass rusher after solid defensive pass rusher. And you say to yourself, well, Jonathan Gannon was able to make chicken salad out of chicken you know what and created a defense that was menacing last year with Baron Browning as his best pass rusher. So even though the Cardinals still don't have Garrett or TJ or one of those big name level pass rushers, because you saw what Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rawlis could do with subpar talent rushing the passer, you're like, well, if you give him Josh Sweat, Jordan Birch, Dalvin Tomlinson, Walter Nolen, and all these sort of weapons to tinker with and go Buffalo Bills style of rushing the passer and just have solid pass rushers continuously subbing in and making the opposing offensive line really tired and get to the line that way. Finesse, maybe not so much power rushing. And then you lose Walter Nolen, which absolutely is brutal, man. You brought him in. You know, I was talking with Alex Clancy on the Cardinals squad show, and he was like, Walter Nolen didn't come in to save the position. I disagree. He kind of did. I'm not saying he's the only weapon there, but anytime you spend a first-round pick on a pass rusher of any set, you're probably doing it because you don't believe in your pass rush talent that much. What I was curious if the Cardinals could do this year was keep contain on the outside, rushing the passer, and get immense pressure up the middle. Stop allowing opposing quarterbacks to step up in the pocket. I mentioned this a lot, but the one thing Tom Brady used to talk about that got to him was pressure up the middle. When you can't step into a throw. When you feel, I believe it was Malik Jackson years ago on the Jaguars, collapsing the pocket from the middle inside, not allowing Tom Brady to step up. He hated that. Plus, you feel the pressure with your knees, your ankles, your lower body extremities. You hate that. And so what I really liked about the Cardinals' defensive line is Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, Walter Nolen, Darius Robinson. Those are 4 solid interior pass rushers, maybe potentially even more in your former first-round picks, who can really make their presence felt in the interior. And then you lose Walter Nolen, and then you say this. Well, now someone's got to step up. And where I go from there to here is this. Losing Starling Thomas sucks. I was Starling Thomas's number 1 anti-fan a year ago because he wasn't great as a rookie. But towards the end of his rookie season, he started to progress. And in his second season, he really started to progress. And in season number 3, I became an actual Starling Thomas fan. He was moving in with the potential of someone who could be a solid number 2 cornerback on a Super Bowl winning team. He might have been more a 3. But if he was a 3 and he was your 3rd cornerback on the field, he was a solid lockdown number 3 with the belief of maybe this guy could be a 2. He's not a 1. And the one thing that kind of sucks is you are already starting to hurt that depth a little bit. And now, although I believe in although I believe in Will Johnson to step up, like I believe Darius Robinson's going to need to step up, you're thrusting a rookie now into the number 2, number 3 cornerback position. But in all reality, it'll be Max Melton and Will Johnson on the outsides with Garrett Williams on the inside. And as much as I like Will Johnson, and I think he's going to be awesome, I think the hardest learning curve from college to pros, is the cornerback position. Because ultimately, you're going from guarding the best wide receiver on a Division I team to Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase on a week in, week out basis. And that's tough. And so if we're talking about two guys now that have to step up for the Cardinals after the injuries to Walter Nolen and Starling Thomas, who I think are very much real injuries that are going to hinder the team for as long as Nolen is out and for as long as it takes Will Johnson to get acclimated. Will Johnson and Darius Robinson, depending how long Walter Nolen is gone, those two guys are going to be thrusted upon to be anchors defensively for the Cardinals. Losing Starling Thomas absolutely blows. You did have a decent amount of depth at the cornerback position, and you do have a decent amount of depth at the pass rusher spot. However, it's time to grow up fast if you're Will Johnson and Darius Robinson. Both guys who are felt like first-round talents. Darius Robinson actually selected in the first round. Will Johnson coming in the second round. Both those guys are going to be asked to be defensive anchors this year. And Darius Robinson, who only played a few games last year, now in his second season, has to make a jump that we didn't think he was going to have to make immediately because Walter Nolen was going to be there. But he's going to have to get pressure up the middle. He's going to have to show us the bull rushing he's been showing us in training camp. He's going to have to show us that Herculean body, moving players around, throwing them around like dummy dolls. He's going to be asked to be the anchor on that Cardinals pass rush. Sometimes he's going to be out on the outside. Sometimes he's going to be on the inside. It doesn't matter. Until Walter Nolen comes back, he's going to be asked to step up tremendously. And to be fair, there could be a much worse landing spot if you're the Cardinals. Because of the depth that they have on this team, because of what they've done through the draft, free agency, through trades, they have a team that is fairly deep. And so when this happens, Walter Nolen, who is called upon, Walter Nolen, who gets injured, and Darius Robinson, who's called upon, you're like, a former first-round pick who showed some promise last year and is dominating guys in training camp. I like what he could do for the Cardinals. But now you're going to ask him to really grow up in year two, to become that anchor defensively as a pass rusher. And even more so than Darius Robinson, you're talking about Will Johnson. With the injury to Starling Thomas, a guy who has progressed over the last couple of seasons, has been someone who has been with someone that has been in Will Johnson, in Starling Thomas, who has improved over the last couple of seasons and has been someone who has shown shades of becoming a true number 2 corner. Will Johnson, with the Starling Thomas injury, is going to have to step up. There's not going to be really any room for that rookie window trying to figure things out. My guy in the chat, do you see Monty trading for a cornerback? No. My guy Aaron in the chat, it's not a Monty Ossenfort thing. Do I think they should think about it? Do I think they should bring in a free agent like Asante Samuel? Yeah, probably. Bring in someone, add depth to that position. But they've already done that. They got Stephen Gilmore from the United Football League, not to be confused with Stephon Gilmore. So they feel good. And to be fair, they do have guys, Max Melton, Elijah Jones, Garrett Williams. But Will Johnson is going to be thrust upon in a role to help solidify the cornerback position. Losing Starling Thomas hurts, but you're going to put Max Melton on one side, Garrett Williams in the slot, and Will Johnson on the other outside. And he's going to be asked to be thrusted upon and be an anchor defensively at the cornerback position. It's a really good spot for the Cardinals to be. Someone gets injured, you have someone who you feel really good about taking their spot. But because of how good Starling Thomas has been, you didn't feel like you had to just thrust Will Johnson into that role. You really didn't feel like you had to. But now with the injury, Will Johnson's got to grow up fast. He's got to show the world why he should have been a middle of the first round selection and not a middle of the second round selection. And to be fair, I believe in Will Johnson. I think he's going to be very good in this league, a potential star in the making. But this gradual growth, this slowly putting guys into the fire, it's not the case anymore. Because yeah, although I like Elijah Jones and Denzel Burke and Max Melton, you got big plans for Will Johnson. And with Starling Thomas out, there is a glaring hole in the outside corner number 2 position. And he's going to be asked to save that role. And to be fair, I believe he can, and I believe he will. But he's going to be asked to grow up very quickly. Become that shutdown outside corner like he was in college. It's just something that felt like, damn, you didn't think that they were going to have to do this so quickly, so swiftly, throwing guys into the fold. You thought that he was going to have a little bit of extra time, but that's not the case. And in the NFL, you got to grow up fast. And Will Johnson is no different in this case. He's got to come in, solidify the cornerback number 2 position, and be ready to rock week 1. We cannot have rookie mistakes, having blown coverages in week 3 and week 4 in a year that is so important for the Arizona Cardinals that they have to make the playoffs. I know no one wants to talk about JG and Monty's jobs potentially being on the line. If the season is bad enough, anyone can get it. And in a year where Kyler Murray kind of needs to make the playoffs, anyone can get it.